In December 2021, a sonar team scanning the depths of Lake Vättern, Sweden's second-largest lake, registered an echo unlike any natural formation, an almost perfect ring of metal buried beneath 120 meters of frigid water. The discovery was first dismissed as a geological anomaly until divers sent down a remotely operated vehicle. Its floodlights revealed a circular structure 30 meters across, its surface engraved with markings corroded but unmistakably German. Among them, a faint serial code, EKL44. Within hours, the coordinates were locked under military restriction. Yet one recovered image leaked online, a glimpse of steel so precisely engineered it could not belong to a sunken ship. Beneath the lake's silence, it seemed, lay a remnant of a project erased from history, a resonance of something once known as Eisenklang. Chapter 1. The Iron Signal beneath Lake Vättern. The first official dive to the site occurred on 18th of December 2021 under the authority of the Swedish Defence Research Agency, FOI. The operation was classified as an environmental inspection, though every diver involved signed a security waiver referencing foreign military material, 1939-1945. The descent began at 14:35 local time from a modified research vessel, MS Gullspång. Subsurface cameras showed sediment clouds rising like smoke as the remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, scanned the lakebed. What emerged was a circular metallic frame partially buried in silt, its edges glowing faintly under artificial light. The video feed captured precision welding inconsistent with the technology of the 1940s. Lines too clean, angles too exact. One of the divers, identified only as RD, later described the discovery as a machine pretending to be wreckage. By 19th December, the Swedish Navy cordoned off the area, declaring it an unexploded ordnance hazard zone. Civilian sonar data from the previous month was wiped from public servers. Despite the secrecy, fragments of raw footage circulated through encrypted maritime networks, showing close-ups of etched characters, Projekt Eisenklang, Prüfstand 3. In English, Project Iron Sound, Test Stand 3. Military historians immediately connected the name to a rumored late-war German acoustic experiment mentioned in partially declassified MI6 files, Operation Strand 6, referencing subsurface resonance devices believed capable of jamming Allied sonar and disrupting communications. No evidence had ever been found, until now. On 22nd December, a special recovery platform arrived at Lake Vättern under the command of Colonel Mikael Lund, a naval engineer attached to Sweden's Strategic Technologies Unit. Lund's internal report, FOI 212894, later leaked to journalists, detailed the structure's composition, an alloy of manganese steel and vanadium, unusual for the period, and internal wiring preserved in paraffin insulation. Radiation scans indicated trace isotopes of thorium, suggesting the device drew power from an experimental generator. The report concluded with a single line: presence of biological contamination inconclusive, further containment required. That phrase, more than any technical detail, ignited speculation. By January 2022, whispers of the iron signal reached international defense circles. Satellite imagery showed increased naval presence around the lake, including unmarked vessels believed to be NATO-affiliated. Meanwhile, Swedish authorities issued a statement claiming the find to be a harmless metallic anomaly. However, investigative journalists from Dagens Nyheter obtained excerpts from an internal communication between FOI and the Swedish Armed Forces Intelligence and Security Directorate, MUST. The message read, "Maintain full electromagnetic silence during all operations at coordinate 58°4 N, 14-37 The structure responds to external frequencies." The implication was chilling. The device was not inert. Historical context only deepened the mystery. Declassified OSS reports from 1946 referenced a missing German research division operating out of Kiel, codenamed Eisenklang. Headed by an engineer named Dr. Werner Mertens, the group was believed to be developing sonar-resistant U-boat hull plating. But an intercepted German transmission dated 3rd March 1945, file OSS Euro TR 1956, mentioned a resonance apparatus relocated from Kiel to an undisclosed northern water body for final testing. No follow-up reports were found, and Mertens disappeared during the Allied advance. The last recorded sighting of him placed him aboard U-482, listed missing in action off the Norwegian coast in April 1945. That submarine was never recovered. When the Lake Fetton object was hoisted partially above the waterline in February 2022, observers described the sound it emitted as unlike anything mechanical, a low, oscillating hum that fluctuated just below human hearing. The surface trembled slightly, enough to ripple the surrounding water. Technicians shut down all power sources aboard the recovery barge, but the vibration continued for several minutes before subsiding. One crew member, interviewed anonymously months later, claimed the tone resonated in the chest, like standing near a subwoofer that wasn't playing music but memory. The report filed afterward labeled the event an acoustic anomaly likely caused by temperature differential. A month later, the structure vanished from the site. When questioned, FOI officials stated that the object had been transferred for secure analysis at an undisclosed inland facility. No transport logs were recorded. However, open-source satellite tracking from late March detected an oversized military cargo convoy traveling under escort toward Karlsborg Fortress, roughly 60 kilometers from the lake. The convoy's lead vehicle bore the insignia of the Swedish Air Defense Research Division, a division dissolved in 1999. What happened inside Karlsborg after that remains speculative, but several locals reported a low hum emanating from the direction of the base on calm nights, followed by bursts of static on FM radio frequencies between 92 and 94 MHz. Historians attempting to trace Project Eisenklang encountered another anomaly. Within the Bundesarchiv in Koblenz, file set TRE 1944-11 had been restricted for decades under NATO oversight. When partial access was granted in mid-2022, researchers discovered that over half of the microfilm reels had been removed and replaced with blank leader tape. One remaining document, a requisition order signed by Mertens, requested 120 kilograms of Schwingungsstahl, or vibration steel, a proprietary alloy designed to transmit acoustic frequencies without energy loss. The destination listed, Testbereich 3, Nordseekanal, the same phrase engraved on the Lake Fetton structure. By autumn, the Swedish government announced a full moratorium on underwater research in Lake Fetton due to environmental instability. Privately, divers were warned not to approach the site or publish sonar images. A whistleblower later released portions of the FOI's restricted environmental study, FOI ENV 5422, which included diagrams showing harmonic frequency interference measured across a 10-kilometer radius. The readings were strongest near midnight, repeating every 11 hours and 42 minutes, a cycle too precise to be natural. The report's final page contained a single notation written by hand. Possible residual function, unknown purpose. In late 2023, a file surfaced on an anonymous Nordic intelligence forum. Labeled Eisenklang Log 3, it contained 10 seconds of recorded audio purportedly captured near Karlsborg Fortress. The sound begins as static, then forms into a distinct pulse. 3 tones, a pause, then 3 more. Acoustics experts determined the pattern's rhythm matched the Morse code for E, the simplest letter in the alphabet, yet a fitting one for the name Eisenklang. Some claimed the tone carried subharmonic frequencies capable of inducing disorientation in listeners. The file was deleted within hours, but copies circulated across encrypted archives, each version carrying slight distortions, as though degraded by repetition. Official statements remain contradictory. The Swedish Defense Research Agency maintains that the discovery was environmental scrap metal of indeterminate origin. Independent divers, attempting to locate the site since 2024, report sonar interference and magnetic anomalies, disrupting compass readings. International researchers note that Lake Fetton's local fauna, particularly freshwater fish, have exhibited erratic migration patterns since the initial excavation. Some environmental biologists propose the vibrations may stem from a natural geological vent. Others privately suspect something still operates beneath the silt. The unanswered question persists. Was Eisenklang merely an acoustic experiment, or part of a deeper wartime initiative linked to signal communication through geological mediums? A declassified excerpt from MI6 document X1427 offers one last clue. It references a non-radio method of transcontinental transmission utilizing resonant metal conduits beneath polar latitude rock strata. The line following it was blacked out completely, except for one visible word, Veton. To this day, at the coordinates where the structure once lay, sonar still registers a faint circular depression. Local fishermen say their radios hum when they cross that point, even with the power switched off. They call it the iron sound. No one lingers long enough to listen. Chapter 2. Operation Sable Vault, the Black Archive Discovery. The collapse of listening post 12B in the Harz Mountains was not reported by any major outlet. Officially, it was catalogued in German federal records as structural subsidence, resulting from soil instability. Yet, when an engineer named Dr. Franz Keller shared photographs of the exposed tunnel system to a closed online forum for military historians in March 2022, the details told a different story. The structure he documented was far too precise for a mere Cold War outpost. Deep within the fractured concrete, steel doors bore faded NATO identification codes, LP12B, such Project Sable Vault. Within a week, Keller's profile disappeared and his images were wiped from all servers. But several users had already archived them. Photos showing boxes of microfilm, stacked neatly behind walls reinforced with lead sheeting. Each box was stenciled with a single phrase, OP Sable, 1952-1971. The subsequent investigation began quietly under the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution, BFV. Internal memo BFV 22041 described the find as a restricted depository associated with Cold War-era atmospheric research. The language was intentionally vague. However, fragments of a separate report leaked to Der Spiegel painted a more disturbing picture. It referenced a series of Anglo-American experiments labeled Project Sable Vault, conducted between 1952 and 1971, involving controlled meteorological disturbances across Eastern European airspace. The purpose, allegedly, was to test atmospheric manipulation for military reconnaissance. The documents indicated that these operations had been coordinated through a secret joint division of the US Air Force and MI6 known as the Ether Dynamics Group, whose existence had never been publicly confirmed. At the site, recovery teams wearing respirators catalogued over 700 microfilm reels, dozens of reel-to-reel magnetic tapes, and several crates of deteriorated meteorological equipment. Most of the reels were too brittle to unwind, their edges fused with age, but a few remained intact, bearing clear stamps: Top Secret, Do Die Mi-6, Unauthorized Disclosure Criminal Offense. Inside the first reels analyzed, researchers discovered grainy photographs of cloud formations taken from stratospheric aircraft over the Baltic region. In the margins of each frame, numbers appeared that did not correspond to standard meteorological data. Cryptographers identified the sequences as operational codes referencing specific flight paths used during NATO's Operation Deep Reel, a 1953 aerial surveillance campaign. These photos were never meant to exist. By April 2022, the German government had sealed the site under NATO supervision, transferring all recovered materials to an undisclosed facility near Wiesbaden. Journalists were told that the operation was an environmental cleanup effort involving decommissioned monitoring infrastructure. Yet several of the recovered reels, catalogued under file numbers SV92A to SV96F, found their way into private hands. Among them was an audio recording labeled Trial Run 09 Oder Line. When played, it emitted bursts of static interlaced with rhythmic pulses resembling coded radio signals. Linguists from the University of Bonn identified faint English phrases embedded within the noise. Test sector active, temperature variance achieved, proceed with seeding protocol. The date at the start of the tape read June 14, 1955. Archival cross-references later revealed that on that same date, the US Air Force's 513th Weather Reconnaissance Squadron reported an unprecedented localized storm event near the Polish border, resulting in 17 civilian deaths and the unexplained crash of 2 Soviet reconnaissance aircraft. No causal link was ever officially acknowledged, but the recovered Sable Vault transcript matched both the time and coordinates of that storm. What followed was quietly erased from Allied weather records for that entire month. Researchers analyzing the microfilm reels found additional disturbing notations. Trial 12, disruption achieved, 4-degree deviation sustained, no visibility. Trial 15, civilian interference probable, proceed regardless. The final reel was labeled 1971. Suspension order. The attached memorandum bore the initials JT and referenced diplomatic exposure risk due to cross-atmospheric impact. Historians speculated that JT could refer to John Trevor, the British meteorologist known for his classified work with RAF intelligence during the early 1970s. His death in a boating accident off Cornwall in 1972, previously dismissed as accidental, was reopened by British authorities briefly in 2023 after the leak of sable vault materials. Inside the tunnel, investigators also uncovered one more anomaly. A small metal box sealed with wax containing a strip of exposed 35mm film. The images showed 5 men in laboratory coats standing before a vast wall of analog control equipment, oscilloscopes, barographs, and pressure regulators. One man, partially obscured, wore a uniform patch depicting crossed lightning bolts beneath a stylized sunburst. This insignia matched no known Allied or Axis division. When enhanced digitally, the photograph revealed a caption scrawled on the wall behind them: "We made weather obey." Forensic testing dated the photo paper to 1954. The discovery's geopolitical implications were immediate. NATO's internal review classified Sable Vault under retrospective secrecy maintenance, meaning that although the documents were decades old, they were resealed as active intelligence. In practice, this prevented public access indefinitely, but independent researchers persisted, tracing fragments of Sable Vault's operational structure through declassified MI6 correspondence from the early Cold War. One particularly revealing file, UK NAT's MI6 ADG 2305, mentioned the use of transferred personnel from Axis research, institutions with experience in acoustic dispersion and ionic precipitation. This phrasing linked Sable Vault to remnants of Nazi scientific circles, absorbed under Operation Paperclip. In late 2022, a whistleblower using the alias Cormorant uploaded a 26-page PDF to a darknet archive. The document contained what appeared to be an excerpt of a post-war budget report detailing financial transfers from the US Department of Defense to the British Meteorological Research Council between 1952 and 1958 under the project code Sable. Several of the expense lines were blacked out, but one remained visible. Atmospheric ion dispersal, Field Unit 5, Hearts. Cross-checking with known facilities placed that unit precisely where the tunnel collapse had occurred. The report closed with an assessment. Operational success limited only by public visibility. After the leak, NATO cyber units purged the document, and multiple users connected to its distribution received formal legal warnings under the US Espionage Act. Still, fragments survived in private archives. Among the final pages was a chilling entry labeled Post-Trial Effects. It listed uncontrolled precipitation variance over civilian zones, unexpected interference with radio and radar, and psychological disorientation among field personnel. None of these side effects were ever publicly studied. As of early 2024, the sealed Sable Vault site remains under military control. Drone footage captured from above the Harz Mountains shows new fencing, sensor arrays, and underground ventilation shafts still venting faint steam even during winter months. Locals report that security patrols now guard the perimeter day and night. The official explanation remains unchanged: hazardous materials containment. But weather records from the region continue to display periodic anomalies. Localized temperature fluctuations of up to 5 degrees Celsius within a radius of 3 kilometers around the coordinates 5144 and N, 10-18E. The pattern occurs on the same dates and times logged in the Sable Vault test files from 1955 through 1958. What makes the discovery most haunting is that the final document in the archive bears a handwritten message in fading ink. The vault never closed. Beneath the line, a signature appears, initials WM, followed by a date, February 1971. Whether WM was one of the scientists or an administrative officer remains unknown, but the phrasing suggests continuation, not termination. And when, in January 2024, a brief and inexplicable snowstorm struck the Harz region, despite recorded temperatures above freezing, the meteorological instruments at Göttingen detected a frequency spike at precisely the same bandwidth as the 1955 test transmissions. Whatever Sable Vault was meant to achieve, it may not have stopped operating. It may simply have learned to hide within the weather itself. Chapter 3: The Vladivostok Sub-Level Transmissions. In February 2019, A team of telecommunications engineers working for the Russian Far East Monitoring Agency detected a faint, rhythmic signal on an abandoned shortwave frequency, 8.372 MHz, broadcasting from somewhere beneath the city of Vladivostok. The signal's pattern resembled a Cold War-era number station, repeating sequences of tones, followed by silence, then 3 brief mechanical pulses. Initially dismissed as interference from aging naval equipment, the pattern persisted for 6 consecutive nights, repeating every hour at 14 minutes past midnight. Analysts traced the signal's origin, not to an active transmitter, but to deep beneath an industrial district once occupied by the Soviet Pacific Fleet Command. Archival schematics revealed that below the complex lay a sealed Cold War installation. Object 512K, decommissioned in 1983. Its existence had been omitted from public records. Its blueprint stamped "Do Not Open." MO, RF 1961. A joint team from the Ministry of Emergency, Situations and the Federal Security Service was dispatched to the site in March 2019. Local residents reported convoys arriving at night, their headlights off, moving toward the old shipyard perimeter. Within days, the entire district was cordoned off, officially citing subterranean instability due to methane buildup. But satellite imagery captured faint power signatures emanating from beneath the ground. Modern power, not residual energy. Days later, a brief leak appeared on a Russian defense forum. A grainy image showing 2 men in protective suits standing in front of a massive steel blast door, painted with the faded inscription 512K Sector 03. Access restricted. The image vanished within hours, the thread deleted. Still, within the amateur radio community, the mysterious transmission had already become known as the Vladivostok Echo. In April 2019, Moscow University linguist Dr. Lydia Morozova, who specialized in cryptographic linguistics, received an encrypted file from an anonymous sender using the name Orion. The file contained a cleaned audio sample of the transmission. She noticed something peculiar beneath the static. There was modulation in the lower frequency band, faintly resembling human speech distorted through a frequency shifter. When slowed and processed, the words became clearer. Signal check. Command sequence. File 421 online. The tone and cadence matched Cold War military communication protocols last used in 1967. What unsettled Morozova was the call sign embedded in the sequence, Volna 7, a designation associated with a Soviet underwater acoustic experiment, reportedly dismantled after the Cuban Missile Crisis. Yet according to declassified naval documents, Volna 7 had never been based anywhere near Vladivostok. In May, an unauthorized team of urban explorers entered the area through a storm drain leading toward the decommissioned complex. They filmed for over 2 hours before losing connection. The footage, recovered later from a memory card found in a confiscated vehicle, showed their descent through narrow tunnels lined with cables, many still carrying current. At 37 minutes in, the group reached a steel door identical to the one from the leaked image. The air beyond it shimmered with condensation, as if humidity were being artificially regulated. A low mechanical hum filled the chamber. Then, for 3 seconds before the camera feed cut out, a voice can be heard over a nearby intercom. Authorization code required. File transmission in progress. The voice was male, heavily filtered, speaking in clipped Russian. None of the explorers were ever identified publicly, and the footage was never officially acknowledged. Following the incident, Dr. Morozova disappeared from public life. Her colleagues later claimed she had been invited to consult on a government encryption contract. However, an internal FSB memorandum leaked in 2021, referenced as F0319 Vlad Signal Recovery Operation, mentioned consultant LM engaged for pattern decoding related to residual military broadcasts from deactivated intelligence network. The document contained a line later redacted: possible reactivation of legacy command relay system associated with Volna 7. Analysts who reviewed the text suggested that Object 512K might not have been a communication site at all, but a control relay for an early Soviet underwater surveillance network built to monitor submarine movement along the Pacific corridor. The signal detected in 2019, therefore, could not have originated from within the facility. It was being relayed through it. Deeper in the leaked memo, an attachment labeled Annex C Acoustic protocol reconstruction referenced a sub-level transmission array buried beneath Vladivostok harbor, directly connected via fiber conduit to the 512K facility. The array's original purpose, according to translated engineering notes from 1960, was to extend communication through subsea acoustic resonance using deep frequency modulation. This technology predated modern sonar networking by nearly 20 years. Yet no official Soviet record of such a system exists. One engineer's notebook, partially declassified in 1998, mentioned artificial harmonic mapping to deep sound channels, an experimental approach to using the ocean itself as a communications medium. Its theoretical inventor, naval research officer Viktor Alexeyevich Nomarov, vanished in 1962 while aboard the research vessel Kronstadt 6. His disappearance was never explained. The rediscovery of 512K reignited speculation about whether Nomarov's work had survived under military classification. In 2020, an independent journalist named Pavel Desyatov obtained photographs of old technical schematics recovered from the Far Eastern State Archive, marked Object 512K Transmission Core. The designs depicted an array of 12 cylindrical resonance chambers descending 200 meters beneath sea level, forming what appeared to be a vertically stacked transmitter. The lower chambers were labeled dormant, the upper three active reserve. One note scribbled in the corner read simply, "Voices remain below threshold." When Desyatov published the images online, his account was suspended within hours under orders of the Federal Security Bureau. His laptop was later found in a pawn shop 900 kilometers away, its hard drive wiped clean. By 2021, independent radio enthusiasts began receiving new transmissions on 8.372 MHz. This time, instead of tones, the broadcast contained bursts of static followed by brief spoken fragments in English, German, and Russian. One recurring phrase repeated across multiple recordings. Project SEAL Network, Node 07 operational. The words matched none of the original Volna 7 phrases. Cyber forensic experts at a civilian lab in Prague identified embedded timecodes corresponding to UTC time from 1958, suggesting the messages might be echoes of archived transmissions repeating through interference. But others noted anomalies inconsistent with simple replay. The modulation patterns exhibited compression artifacts consistent with modern digital transmission. Someone, or something, was transmitting through a forgotten system built nearly 70 years ago. When Western intelligence analysts cross-checked the coordinates of Vladivostok's 512K facility with declassified American reconnaissance data, they discovered references to Soviet subsea signal testing in a 1961 CIA brief labeled SR-62-117, Acoustic Chain Expansion, USSR. The brief described a planned network of deep ocean transmitters designed to maintain secure contact with remote automated devices. Those devices were likely experimental drones, early prototypes of what later became known as autonomous listening buoys. If the network had remained partially functional, it could, in theory, still carry automated messages triggered by environmental cues, such as changes in magnetic fields or seismic activity. In short, the 2019 signal may not have been sent by humans at all. It might have been a machine waking up after decades of dormancy. In early 2022, Russian maritime researchers conducted a discrete survey of Vladivostok's harbor floor using magnetometric imaging. The results, never officially released, were later leaked through anonymous forums. A perfectly circular metallic structure measuring 38 meters across, positioned 170 meters below the harbor. Its design matched the diagrams from Nomarov's notes. The anomaly pulsed faintly with residual current. The team reported interference with all underwater communications equipment during the survey, each failure occurring precisely when the shortwave broadcast repeated. As the last recorded entry in the field log stated, array responsive at low band, unknown energy source, terminating scan. Chapter 4, the Zurich Memorandum and the Vanished Convoy. On March 18, 2020, a Swiss archivist named Dr. Henriette Vogel stumbled upon a sealed envelope misfiled within the Federal Archives in Bern. Its label read, simply, Zurich Memorandum, Restricted Distribution, 1948. The envelope contained a carbon copy of a diplomatic cable, its heading stamped US Military Mission, Zurich, CH. It referenced an unregistered convoy that crossed the Austrian border in May 1945 under orders of Operation Quiet Transit. According to the memo, the convoy consisted of 8 US Army trucks escorted by the 45th Infantry Division, transporting cargo classified as cultural assets, Level 1. No such operation appeared in official post-war logistics, yet handwritten notes in the margin hinted at something darker. Non-standard materials secured. Zurich safe house awaiting clearance. Within hours of its discovery, the file was transferred to the Swiss Federal Intelligence Service for review. 3 days later, Dr. Vogel's digital access was revoked and the file was reclassified as missing due to catalogue error. But not before she had taken high-resolution scans of every page. When historians reviewed the text, they identified coded references aligning with a defunct American intelligence network known as the Alsos Recovery Division, a unit responsible for securing Nazi nuclear research during the war's closing months. The date and convoy route described in the Zurich Memorandum coincided with the evacuation of several Nazi research scientists from southern Germany. Cross-referencing Allied debrief records revealed that 8 individuals listed as secured assets disappeared en route to Switzerland. They were never documented as having arrived in Allied custody. The newly uncovered cable raised a terrifying possibility: that a classified transfer of personnel or material continued in secret long after the war officially ended. The memorandum mentioned a second code name, Black Mercury. The term appeared alongside phrases like containment apparatus, unstable core residue, and biothermal hazard. The E phrasing was ambiguous, but eerily consistent with contemporary Allied terminology for nuclear or radiological materials. A second document, partially declassified in 1967, described a lost transport containing unknown high-yield compound removed from the Reich's Alpine sector. Historians had dismissed the reference as confusion over uranium shipments, but when Dr. Vogel's scans were analyzed, the cipher in the original cable revealed coordinates pointing not to Austria, but to a glacial region in southeastern Switzerland, the Todi Range. The implication: the convoy never reached Zurich. It vanished in the mountains. In June 2020, a private expedition led by geophysicist Lucas Brenner was launched to investigate the area. Brenner's team located a section of glacial ice containing unusually high metal density readings. 2 weeks into the dig, they uncovered a fragment of a rusted vehicle chassis bearing the faint markings of the US Army Quartermaster Corps. Nearby, a partially legible serial plate read OQT-7, Convoy 221B, Operation Quiet Transit. Alongside it lay the remains of a sealed metal container, its surface scorched and pitted as if exposed to extreme heat. Radiation scans indicated faint localized contamination, levels too consistent to be natural. The team immediately contacted Swiss authorities. Within 48 hours, the dig site was quarantined under a federal emergency order. Officially, the cause cited was unexploded wartime ordnance. 2 weeks later, Brenner disappeared. His colleagues reported receiving automated emails from his account containing garbled strings of text and attached images of old transport manifests marked Project Black Mercury, Zurich Depot 7A. The metadata traced the files to a military IP block registered to the US European Command in Stuttgart. No official comment was made, but an anonymous official within the Swiss military claimed the US Embassy requested immediate access to the recovered materials for historical repatriation purposes. Publicly, the embassy denied involvement. In September 2020, fragments of a third document appeared on the dark web, Memorandum 9Z, Handling and Containment of BM Substrate. The memo, bearing a 1948 US Atomic Energy Commission header, described a substance that emits a persistent photonic reaction when exposed to magnetic variance. It also noted that the material's behavior suggests controlled bioreactivity. No such compound exists in declassified records. The memo concluded with the chilling line, transfer to Zurich under diplomatic seal. Do not expose to atmosphere beyond 3 minutes. The implication was clear. Operation Quiet Transit was not about art or gold. It was about something volatile, possibly alive. Satellite imagery from 2021 revealed that the Todi Range excavation site remained under constant surveillance. A cluster of temporary structures had appeared over the ice, canvas domes, power generators, and security fences. No public research had been authorized in the region. Local climbers reported hearing low mechanical hums beneath the glacier and witnessing periodic flashes of light from beneath the ice at night. When a French mountaineering team tried to approach, they were detained by Swiss border police and escorted out without explanation. The government cited environmental protection violations, but leaked flight records showed several unmarked cargo aircraft departing Zurich military airfield for undisclosed destinations during that same week. Later that year, Dr. Vogel's digital backups were seized under a Swiss National Security Act warrant. Before they were confiscated, she released a portion of her correspondence to an investigative journalist. One email included a scanned image of a final, unsigned memorandum dated 1949. Its header read, Joint Task 4002, Interagency Oversight on Post-Recovery Assets. The memo discussed containment breaches, observed within cryogenic samples recovered during quiet transit, and that the specimens exhibit residual kinetic energy despite null temperature storage. In the margin, a handwritten annotation read, Reclassification pending under NATO directive, Zurich Vault sealed indefinitely. The word specimens was underlined twice. In December 2022, an anonymous source leaked infrared footage allegedly taken from beneath the Zurich Federal Archives building. The video showed what appeared to be a subterranean vault filled with cylindrical tanks emitting faint blue luminescence. One of the tanks bore a stenciled marking, BM4. Experts who analyzed the footage noted frost buildup consistent with cryogenic storage, but no identifiable containment controls. The leak was dismissed as a hoax, yet days after it circulated, the Swiss government shut down power to the entire archival block, citing a chemical leak in ventilation systems. No further information was provided. Then, in early 2023, the shortwave monitoring network based in Geneva recorded intermittent high-frequency transmissions emanating from the Todi region, simple bursts of binary code repeating in loops. When translated, the sequence formed a single phrase. BM3, stable, relocation complete. A second sequence followed 12 hours later. Zurich memorandum closed. Since that day, the signals have not reappeared. To this day, no official government, Swiss, American, or otherwise, acknowledges the existence of Operation Quiet Transit. The remains of the convoy have never been publicly displayed, but the final note found in the Zurich memorandum reads, transfer complete, containment status uncertain, recommend permanent burial, and perhaps, somewhere deep in the ice where the trucks came to rest, the residue of black mercury remains, glowing faintly in the dark, awaiting the next thaw. Chapter 5. The Murmansk Cache and the Polar Directive. In the summer of 2021, Russian geologist Anatoly Vikulin led a civilian expedition to survey permafrost degradation near the Murmansk coastline. What began as a climate research mission turned into a classified incident within days. At coordinates 69° N, 33°23E, Vikulin's team discovered a series of metallic containers partially exposed by melting ice, each stamped with Soviet military insignia and an unfamiliar code name, Polar Directive 1959. The crates were reinforced with lead lining and internal insulation, suggesting they were never meant to be reopened. Inside the first container lay dozens of sealed canisters, faded red stars still visible on their caps. The labels were hand-typed in Cyrillic. Crystal 12, Sekretna. Crystal 12, classified. Radiation readings spiked the moment the lids were breached. Within 48 hours, the Russian Ministry of Defense arrived, sealed the site, and detained the entire research team. The official report later claimed the group had unearthed obsolete Cold War equipment contaminated by industrial waste. But Vikulin's journal, recovered from his tent, told a different story. He described finding not one, but 4 buried compartments arranged in a circular formation. Beneath them lay a reinforced hatch leading deeper underground. Carved into the metal was a serial tag, USSR Norlab, Polar Directive 4B, 1959. Norlab, short for Northern Laboratory Division, was a little-known Soviet scientific program believed to have been shut down in the early 1960s following a series of accidents in Novaya Zemlya, but a recently declassified internal report, Archive D1123 FSB 2020, confirmed that Norlab had conducted experiments on field-deployable low-yield radiothermic devices designed for atmospheric interference. The recovered cache near Murmansk, it appeared, was a storage point for one such project. What unsettled investigators most, however, wasn't the presence of the devices themselves, but what was found sealed beneath them. When ministry recovery teams reopened the hatch weeks later, they discovered a steel chamber containing racks of glass ampules suspended in transparent gel. The labels, faded but legible, bore the marking K12, phase compound prototype. Each ampule contained a metallic crystalline structure, glowing faintly under ultraviolet light. Laboratory analysis conducted at the Kurchatov Institute in Moscow indicated trace isotopes consistent with bismuth and thorium, materials used in experimental radiothermic cells. Yet the crystalline lattice exhibited unnatural self-stabilization behavior, maintaining structural integrity despite ambient temperature fluctuations. Declassified memos from the early 1960s referenced Project K12 as a non-conventional energy storage medium intended for autonomous polar relays. The technology, if authentic, was decades ahead of its time. The deeper the investigators went, the more the story unraveled. A file marked Directive Memorandum 021P1 Confidential, or issued February 12, 1960, surfaced in the Russian State Archive, referencing an order from the Soviet Council of Ministers to cease all field trials under Polar Directive and relocate sensitive materials to Site Mir-3 for indefinite containment. Site Mir-3 corresponded precisely to Vikolin's discovery location. Attached to the memo was a brief handwritten note: crystals continue activity, reported interference with magnetic field detectors, do not expose to radio frequencies. The directive was signed by General Mikhail Kurbanov, head of the Northern Scientific Directorate, who died in an unexplained car accident later that same year. The existence of Project K12 drew renewed scrutiny after independent journalists published leaked excerpts of a 1997 CIA field summary labeled Siberian Residue Analysis. The report described unverified Soviet materials exhibiting persistent photonic emission under extreme cold. Analysts concluded that the US had failed to replicate the phenomenon, despite multiple classified attempts. Among the attachments was a debrief transcript from a defector scientist who stated, "The crystals were designed to power something autonomous, something that listens." The meaning of listens remained ambiguous, but declassified fragments of intercepted communications between Soviet Arctic research posts hinted at the creation of self-sustaining, polar monitoring arrays capable of field consciousness through electromagnetic induction. If true, it would place Soviet research decades ahead of even modern AI sensor design. By mid-2022, satellite imagery revealed new activity around the Murmansk site: freshly laid concrete, military vehicles, and mobile command centers under Arctic camouflage. Local fishermen reported hearing continuous low-frequency hums near the coastline, especially during solar storms. Environmental monitoring stations began registering small but consistent electromagnetic spikes, synchronized across multiple Arctic coordinates, suggesting a linked network reactivating after decades of dormancy. A Norwegian Defense Ministry bulletin quietly acknowledged persistent interference with naval communication bands near the Barents Sea, consistent with high-output radiothermic anomalies. Unofficially, Western intelligence agencies suspected that Polar Directive might have been an early Soviet attempt at a geophysical surveillance system, an array capable of detecting magnetic or seismic disturbances across vast distances. Then came the transmission. On January 3, 2023, the Russian Meteorological Service recorded a brief coded signal transmitted at 17 kHz, a frequency historically reserved for deep-sea submarine communication. The message consisted of repeating phrases in archaic Russian Morse. Directive resumed. Mir-3 operational. Cross-analysis showed the pulse signature matched the harmonic frequency emitted by the recovered K12 crystals during laboratory testing. Yet no active transmitters existed at those coordinates. When field agents arrived at the Murmansk site, the installation was gone, completely dismantled, leaving only frozen trenches and melted snow where the structures once stood. The only trace left behind was a single steel plaque half buried in ice, engraved with two words, "Still active." 2 months later, the Kurchatov Institute issued a silent update to its classified inventory. All recovered K12 samples listed as destroyed by containment breach. The event was not reported publicly, but leaked footage from an internal training session showed technicians evacuating the facility amid flickering lights and severe magnetic interference. In the background, a monitor briefly displayed fluctuating waveforms labeled MER3 telemetry link, re-established. Researchers later discovered that the signal originating near Murmansk had reappeared thousands of kilometers away, this time from beneath the Greenland ice shelf. The frequency matched exactly, including the same closing phrase, "Directive resumed." American military satellites soon detected faint thermal anomalies across the polar circle, forming a near-perfect hexagonal pattern centered on the Arctic Ocean. Analysts noted that the geometry corresponded to Soviet deep field mapping, grids used during Polar Directive between 1958 and 1961. The pattern seemed to pulse once every 72 hours, aligning precisely with geomagnetic fluctuations recorded during the height of the Cold War's nuclear test era. What remains unclear is whether the K-12 crystals were a form of experimental reactor material, a communications relay, or something else entirely. But the final declassified entry from the Polar Directive archive, dated December 1961, might offer a clue. It reads, "Network dormant but responsive to field change. Await reactivation upon thaw. Containment incomplete." In the margin, a final handwritten line appears, smeared by moisture. "If the ice melts, it will wake." And now, as the Arctic permafrost recedes year by year, the question lingers among scientists and intelligence analysts alike. Did something beneath the ice truly awaken, or did it never stop operating at all?